Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Coaching from the Heart with myself, Tyler Thurman, and my good friend, colleague, and co-host, Harold Feddersen. Hey, Harold.
Hi, Tyler.
As you all might have noticed, we don't have a video feed today, so sorry about that. We're having some technical snafus going on, so we might just have to go without the video. So we apologize for that, and we'll surely have it fixed for next week's show. But in the meantime, we're just gonna we're gonna go on with the show, Harold. And so the show must go on. That's right. And so today's topic is I called the show "The Truth Behind Anger," and we're really just going to be diving into the topic of anger and seeing if we can learn a little bit more about it. You and I together, Harold. I'm looking forward to it.
Me too.
And so, but just before we dive in, as always, I want to give people a place where they can find us. As most people probably know by now, Harold and I are professional transformative coaches. We work with individuals and small groups and maybe even large groups. I don't know about you, Harold. I haven't quite gotten there yet, but but we work with people to help them basically transform their lives, have more wonderful lives, have more beautiful experiences of life. And so if you're interested in working with Harold and or myself on a more deeper level, you can reach me at www.coachtylerthurman.blogspot.com. And Harold, where can everybody find you?
It can be found at www.haroldfeddersen.ca.
Fantastic. All right, so I'm going to toss it over to you, Harold, so you can kind of set the table for today's topic.
Toss me the anger ball.
That's right.
Okay, so I guess actually the first place we probably want to start is actually just acknowledging that we all have a relationship with the emotion anger just to start. Because a lot of people are really uncomfortable with anger. In our society, we often condemn people for showing anger because we're uncomfortable with it. And a lot of the time we don't understand what it is that's going on. So I think it's the first thing is just to become aware of what is your relationship with anger. Like, how comfortable are you with your own anger? Because what is it? There are three options that we have with anger. We can shoot it out at another person, which often is like a yelling or can be physical as well. Number two, we can shove it down, where we just stuff that anger down inside of our own bodies, where it just slowly eats away at our biology. And then the third option, which is kind of never really talked about, or never was in my life until sort of, last 5 or so years, is to actually be present with your anger and release the energy of it, but in a way that brings no harm to yourself or others.
I like that.
Yeah, because it's we've all felt, we all like, that's what's great about anger, is we all know it. Like, we've all been angry.
Right.
Maybe even today, people are like, I'm so angry. But often we don't actually allow ourselves to just feel it, right? We're in some sort of, I got to get rid of it. I need to just, there's no thinking, and we just explode at someone, or I just got to shove it down. So it's good to know that anger is, I like to think of it like an energy storm. It's got a lot of juice, and that juice has got to go somewhere. Like, you got to let it sort of pass through. Like, if you have a prairie landscape and then a storm comes in, it's like this big storm and it just hits. But if you allow it, it can actually just pass through the prairies, and then it's gone. So I think that's a good place to start, just to sort of lay some foundations before we get into the truth behind it.
Yeah. Yeah, and in fact, I really like how you put that, Harold. And it strikes me we're so uncomfortable with it, like you said, that we even pretend we don't have it and we call it something else.
Yeah.
Like, I'm frustrated,
Yeah.
or I'm stressed, or and and just we could all own it just right here, at least on the show today, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes we get angry. That's okay.
Yeah.
That's to be angry sometimes is to be human.
Absolutely.
And so it's almost, we're just going to give you all permission. Not that it means anything in particular, Harold and I's permission, but we're going to give it nonetheless. Just it's okay. It's okay. And although I can't remember where I heard this, but I heard somebody say, or was a quote or something about, you know, if you're angry, or when you're angry, right? Because everyone gets angry, just hide the knives. No, I don't mean that so crudely, but really just meaning we do have to be a little bit careful about the manifestations of it, because there's obvious consequences to those things. But yeah, we all get angry. It's okay. So I think that's a beautiful place to start. So thanks for getting us going in that direction.
And we might, so it's, I think maybe we'll just talk a little bit about, because that's that little hide the knives thing is a good one, because it is harmful to others, and it's harmful to us, and it's harmful to our relationship with the other if we allow our anger to spray out at people.
Sure. Sure. Because usually it kind of manifests as a word that comes to mind would be violence, right? Or attack of some kind.
Yeah. And if it's not at someone else, then most likely your thing is actually inside of yourself, which is the same kind of violent attack, but inside of your own system.
Right.
So it's good to, it's most likely you're one or the other for your kind of go-to. And that third option, the one that is really the healthy one, is to allow the anger, like allow the energy of it to pass through. So some ideas of how to do such a thing is, so I'm just going to throw out some. So one is you grab like a mallet and a 2x4, and you just let yourself release it from the mallet to the 2x4 in isolation, not, don't do that in front of your kids or whatever. That's one. Another one, a good one, is you take one of those big, we don't have them up here, but you have them, those big, huge telephone books, and you use that, and you let the anger sort of pass through you physically. What's another one?
Yeah, no, those are good. Those are good. Just while you're kind of brainstorming there, Harold, I thought I'd just put a slight distinction in, and I'll see if this one rings true for you at all or not. But I've kind of discovered over the years for myself that there's a slight difference between releasing anger and practicing anger. Because there's essentially sort of there's a movement. I don't know if it was in the 90s or when exactly it first started showing up, about very intentionally getting angry And to
Mm,
me, that's a little bit different. And there's actually some research that supports the fact that actually gets us really good at being angry.
yeah.
So we find ourselves angry more of the time, which again, it's not bad, but it's also really unpleasant.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I see what you're saying there.
yeah, and so I just want to make a subtle distinction there. I don't know if that will make sense to everybody, but I think it's important because I think what you're saying is just it's like a beautiful. It's like we look at it, we sort of we do something with it. Um, Essentially, whether it's letting it go physically or letting it go energetically. I guess those are similar things,
Hmm.
um, but that's different to like, okay, I'm gonna get angry, and so I
Yeah.
can get it out,
So I can get
right?
in touch with my anger. That's different. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've found that people that have done that and do that, they tend to be pretty angry people. So it's not all that helpful in my experience.
Yeah, because I think what we are talking about is you're already angry. Like you're already in the anger's already upon you,
Right,
and
right.
it's like now what are you going to do with that? Once
You
you're already angry, you get it out on someone, you shove it in yourself, or this third option of releasing it intentionally with the intention of letting the anger, like letting the anger of it, the sort of the energy of it, the storm of it pass through so that you can get to what we're eventually going to talk about, which is what's underneath of it.
right, right. Yeah, absolutely.
Segue.
You set yourself up. It was a self
That
alley.
was I didn't even realize I was doing that. Okay, so are we ready to go to the next bit?
Yeah, just what what's anger all about?
Oh my
Because I mean we sort of hinted at it with the show, right? Because
God.
saying that it's not good or bad. It just is. It's just part of being a human being. That already flies in the face of what most of our society believes, which is it is bad. And oftentimes we think that, I think, because of that manifestation of violence.
Yeah.
We look at the form, in other words, and not what's behind the form, which is what we're going to do in the show today, starting right now, Harold.
Yeah, 'cause in our society, we look at people who release their anger at other people, and that makes us uncomfortable, as it should, because they're
Right.
falsely spraying us with their own stuff.
Yeah, it's targeted and projected, and so
Yeah,
and that can be harmful to other people and their person, their bodies.
yeah, and it's both spiritually and emotionally immature.
Yeah, so say more about that.
Okay, so um, so the more we become emotionally and spiritually mature, the more we, in a non-shameful or non-blaming way, become responsible for our experience.
I love that.
Okay, so that is a huge leap. I think it was either last week or the week before. You said as soon as you can see that it's in you, you are way ahead of the game. And I'm paraphrasing what you said. Yours was more eloquent,
No, that was pretty good.
but that's the thing. The key, though, the key is to not do it in a blaming or shaming way, because you don't like then. That's just it's more the same, but that's a different conversation. So when we are willing to say, "I am angry," uh, that's a different thing than "you make me angry."
Mm, so
There's a
important.
there's such a big ownership, responsibility, maturity to shifting the way we speak it.
And this really reaches back to an overarching theme of our show, I think, of a lot of, if not all of our episodes, which is the victim victimizer dynamic.
Yeah. Not being
because
responsible for your experience.
yeah, to point the finger and to say, my anger is your fault, that is to be a victim, or at least to take that role on at the very least. And that's what it looks like. So it's a responsibility conversation. But responsibility, that word, I think, can sound a little off sometimes, just because
Yeah.
it's like, oh, it's almost like it's almost like, oh, it's I'm in control of it, so I'm just gonna, uh, it makes it sound like it's more conscious than it is, because
Mm.
like you said, usually we just sort of find ourselves in anger, and then
Hmm.
from there we got to go from there. We got to,
Yeah.
um, and so it's yeah, I just want to really emphasize that part, that it's really important to see that anger is it's an internal game, if you will, and it's something that gets created within us, um, and that's a 100% of the time thing that we
Hmm.
can either see or we can't see, and both are fine. They're just means you're somewhere on the spectrum there
On the
of
spectrum, yeah.
yes. And the more you can see the truth of how it's actually getting created, which we're going to go more into detail here in a minute, but the more of that you can see, um, just the I don't know what the word gentler is the word that's coming to mind, but usually gentle and anger don't go together very well. But the gentler your experience of the anger is going to be. Um, that might sound strange, but that's kind of my experience. Um, the anger is still there, but there's not as much of the uh, the the target there, that outward projection, that attack element, um, kind of fades a bit, I think, when
Hmm.
you see more of what's behind it. So
Which is where we're going next.
yeah, so I think you were about ready to kind of jump into that.
So I think first we'll just say that you absolutely should not believe what Tyler and I are about to say. You should enter your own experience to find out if this is true or not for you.
Oh, I love that, Harold. I wish we could rewind the show and start with that. Because and put that at the beginning of all of our shows. Because oh my gosh, our experience is so much more valuable than us talking heads.
Yeah.
Right, the
Because, and the
intellect
reason why I
part.
say that is for this particular topic, when I first was introduced to what we're about to talk about, I did not believe it. I said, "There's no, that's not true. I know that's not true because blah blah blah." So here's the truth that now I wholeheartedy I get I get it. I get it every time now when I get angry, with a little bit of, once the storm has passed through, because you usually can't do this work while the storm's going on. While the storm is on, you hunker down, put on your rain jacket.
Yeah, let the storm pass.
Yeah, it's gotta.
Okay.
But once the storm has passed, uh,
Put on a raincoat.
put take off the raincoat and get ready for the inner cleansing. So anger is always, every time, without exception, a ruse. Anger is anger is
It's a
a
puppet.
sleight. It's a sleight of hand. It is a puppet. It's a bodyguard. Its job is to protect us from sadness.
Hmm.
Always. Anger comes up, it comes out, it's like a protective, like a tiger coming out of its cave, and its job is to protect the sadness.
Yeah.
Always. So just that alone, if we just stopped there, you could actually spend a bunch of time finding the truth of that in your experience. It does take a particular kind of looking to see how the anger is actually sadness. So I have an example.
Well, Harold, just
Oh,
before you jump
yeah.
in, I just wanted to really emphasize that the part of it as a defense, so that we can see. So that I think that's really a beautiful setup to seeing what's behind it, which, like you said, sadness. Sadness. I talk about it as fear sometimes too, but similar flavors. Um, But if you think about like what anger is and how we've been talking about it, it really is it's like there's this warrior attack stance mentality that goes with anger, right? It's an attack as a defense, right? We're lashing out um, because something else is going on, right?
Yeah.
Because why would we need to lash out? We'll talk more about this in a minute, but we have to look and see what are we guarding, right? Because it's like a guard. A guard is, sometimes guards have to attack in order to maintain their post.
In order to protect
Yeah, to protect what
the queen or the king.
Yeah, whatever's the prize behind the door. But it's just worth seeing that you know, it's any any kind of lashing out is it's an attack, but behind that it's a defense. And if you can see that, then you can begin to look past it to, well, surely there must be something there worth defending, right? Or maybe not.
Or maybe not. And because I think that's a good thing for us to look at too, is that all of our emotions are created because of our unconscious, mostly, interpretations of situations happening in our story.
Well
Because
said.
as we distinguish the difference between the story of this life we're living and what we are, the roller coaster, if you will, of emotions shifts.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's my experience.
yeah, mine too. Where are we going? Example.
That's right.
So
Yeah,
I
you had something juicy, and then I
I had
interrupted.
some juicy. Yeah, this is. So let me go into the. So I had a boss once who did not do their job the way they were, the way they're supposed to, and so I felt through a misinterpretation, but I felt that part of that person's job or role or responsibility was falling onto me, and that made me angry. And I was angry that I had to do both my job and part of this person's job. And so, and this was not that long ago. It was a year or two ago, and so I was like, okay, so you're angry a lot about this. What's going on? Because you know that anger is a ruse. So what are you actually? What is the sadness that you are trying to cover? And the sadness for me was that I felt like I wasn't sort of good enough to be able to hold the responsibility of that, both my role and part of that person's role. So I was sad that I didn't have that capacity.
There was a worth conversation in there somewhere.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah,
And whenever the worthiness conversation comes up, there is sadness.
it's always going on somewhere in there.
So just as an example of how we once the sort of anger storm passes, we have to be able to look at, in a way, to see what is it that's actually triggering the anger. And like I said, you don't have to believe us, but my experience over years is always, 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 it's sadness. There's something that the anger is protecting us from, like you said, guarding us from a sadness, or you said fear. For me, it's always a form of sadness.
Yeah, and Harold, I believe when we were chatting about the topic for the show previously, you had also said something about, was it sadness over a loss of love? Was that?
Yeah, because so the layers, that's exactly how it goes. So
Yeah.
the surface layer is the anger, and the anger is the protector of the sadness. And this, I didn't get this, Tyler, it was like 2 or 3 years later. I was listening to my spiritual teacher, Adyashanti, give a talk on love. And he said, and I'd never connected these things before, he said, always when you feel sad, what you're actually sad about is the loss of some form of love. Because love is the foundation of everything.
Yeah, our being.
Yeah. So if we feel, and it still works through our story and our sort of character, there's still interpretation of loss, and there's that stuff. But if we're interpreting on a deep, like, this doesn't happen on our mind, like the surface of our minds. This
Yeah.
is working under the layers and deep in our system. If we believe there's some kind of loss of love, we will feel sad, because
Right.
that love is that ultimate, that connection between
Yeah.
all things, all
It's
humans, all things, and all everything.
it's devastating.
So to go back to my example, so on the surface there was anger, underneath was the sadness of not being worthy of being able to do this job. And then I was like, okay, so what, because this is work. Like, you don't think like there's loss of love at work. Most of us don't.
No, that would
Um,
that would not be the thing we go to.
right, like you get the CEO of AT&T is like, what is the loss of love that I'm interpreting here? But this is what it is. It really is. Whether you're the CEO of a giant corporation, or you're a stay-at-home dad or mom or whatever, it doesn't matter sort of what where it is in the world or what it is you're doing. So in my case, there was the feeling of the lost love was the connection, the sort of community of when everybody is bringing their best self forward in the team, that we as a team could change the world, so to speak. So for me, the loss of love was that loss, because loss and connection are so interconnected. It was the loss of that, like the global us, or we at this place, was falling apart because one person wasn't doing their full role.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's somewhere in there is also the conversation of separation and disconnection. Like I think we talked about it again recently. We're always talking about these things, but
Mm-hmm.
just the um, unity, right? Or wholeness or oneness, right?
The
That's
we, yeah, last week,
yeah,
the
the we.
we
That's right. Yeah,
and
and
compassion.
that really is the essence of what love is.
Yeah.
is not, it's not the essence of our seemingly fragmented self. It's the we. It's the namaste place,
Yeah.
right?
It's the all of us, the one of us.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
sorry, I interrupted. Did you?
No,
Were
that's
you?
perfect.
So I
Because
thought, yeah. Go ahead.
because at the root of it, it is that, right? It's the loss of the we. Because
Right,
underneath of all of this story and all these beliefs we have and thoughts, there is the sort of universal oneness.
right, right.
And so when we come into the form of our being and we feel the loss of that truth, then that is a loss of love, which then can permeate up into the sadness, which
Yeah,
then can manifest anger as a way to protect us from that.
yeah. Now, Harold, it's kind of funny, right? Because I love the word you used, ruse.
Yeah,
It's
I
all
like that word.
it's all kind of a ruse, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a pageant.
Because why would you need a defense for a sadness about a loss of love that hasn't occurred? Now, our awareness of it is that it has occurred. So, in fairness, that's where it comes from, right? That's our experience of that loss of love. But there's sort of a truth that um, we've never actually left our source, and we can sort of find our way back there in any moment. So I want to honor the experience of the loss of love, and also point to the fact that it's not true on a sort of the biggest level,
Hmm.
right? So sort of our individual experience, it is true, but on an even deeper level, that unity has not gone anywhere. Um, Now that's very different than behavior, right? Because that doesn't mean that very easily could be interpreted as well. And then all of a sudden, my boss started behaving in the way that I thought they should, and then I was okay, right? That's not. Again, that's going back to not taking responsibility for your experience, um, and projecting it outside. But but yeah, it's all kind of made up. It's all kind of, we're not seeing something. We're not seeing that deeper truth, and it's kind of funny how it manifests like that. I don't know how it got set up like that, but it that does seem to be how it works for pretty much everybody I've ever met. Um, but uh, but there's something deeper, worth seeing about it. And by the way, you all out there might put very different words to it than Harold and I are putting to it now. Um, But there's something to be seen behind the anger, and even behind the sadness, or fear, whatever that looks like to you. And and again, I think it's a beautiful place to re-establish we're not making anger wrong or bad, and certainly not sinful, right? um, you know, avoid the violence as best you can. Uh, but anger in and of itself is part of the human experience. So we're not making it wrong. We're just saying, hey, let's look at this. Let's see what's really going on behind the scenes. That's why the show is called The Truth Behind Anger. um,
I
yeah,
think there's also the if you follow in your experience through the layers of the anger and then the sadness and then what is the lost love that is or is not happening, that is then where um, we can act, that is where the actual work is to change everything else. It's sort of like to give a visual, since We can't see each other. So if you think of a flower, the actual flower petals, the beautiful part of the flower is usually what we look at. So that is sort of the anger. The anger is what we usually see. And then the stem and the leaves are the sadness that the flower is distracting us from. But at the root of it, underneath of the soil, are all the roots of this flower. So even though we look at the flower, the source of the flower is the roots. So if we want, let's take my example, for example. That's cute. If I then recognize, okay, what is actually being lost here is the team. Our team is breaking down because one person is not doing their role in the team. So if I can see that, I'm now at the roots, I can actually nurture the roots and affect the stems, the leaves, and the flower. So I could actually go to the boss and say, it appears that this is happening. And for me, this is what's happening to the team and my experience. Is this happening for you? And is this something we can shift? Because if we just stay at the flower level, then that means I'm in the anger. And if my anger is an outward expression, I will be yelling and screaming or whatever at the person. If I'm a stuffer, I will be stuffing this anger down inside of myself, making myself sick and disconnected, and most likely shunning the other person because I'm believing they're the source of my anger.
Right. We're resenting them and harboring resentment. Yep.
So then the other option is to take that third option that we talked about right at the beginning, and we let the sort of physical energy of the anger, pass through in, like, whatever, pounding bread or, putting up a rock wall or whatever. Something, usually almost always is something physical to help us move that energy out. And then we can get to a place where we can then start to look at it. Okay, what is this about? And then we sink into, what am I sad about, or what am I really feeling? And sometimes that takes a lot of work to get into. And then once we're there, then the question is, what is the loss of love? And once you're down to the super roots of it all, then if you want to change sort of your life circumstances, that's where you would work.
Yeah. Now, so that would be the behavior part, right? And oftentimes that is often just a manifestation of the inner work, right? It's just something's going to flow from that. Now you can be conscious about it too. But yeah, I think you were going to say something about that.
Well, it's who you're going to be in that relationship.
Right. Sure.
Because anger only exists in relationship, right? There has to be two things interacting in order for there to be anger. Whether it's two things within yourself, or you and another person, or another thing.
But in a funny way, it also holds that relationship apart, right?
Yeah.
The anger itself is what denies us the we.
Yeah.
Because its function is to deny that interconnectedness, right? It's to hold apart. It's to judge. It's to disconnect. And so that's why it's so important to look at it for what it really is, and then begin to
unravel it.
Yeah, unravel it. Let it transform, and then it comes out the other side. Comes out as something else.
And it's funny, I like the what I like about the flower analogy is that most of us think flowers are beautiful and we love them. Most of us do not think anger is beautiful. No. But anger can be beautiful in the incredible gifts that it offers us in our awareness of ourselves and how we are interacting with our life. So it can actually be incredibly beautiful if looked at through a certain lens.
Yeah, you know what comes to my mind when you say that, Harold, is a check engine light. That's sort of a more crude example than the flower, but I think apt in its message, in that it gives us really good indicator where we're at on the inside, especially as we understand more and more about what it is and why it's there, and in fact, why it's there. That is actually one of the things that we get to transform for ourselves. In when we look at it, why it's there going forward becomes, oh, it's there to show me the lack of love or the loss of love, so
Mm.
that I can reestablish that.
Mm-hmm.
I can reestablish that. It's not on the other person. In fact, this is rare, but it could be, it is all in your head, and they are in a place of love still. Now, that's not usually the case because of how how pervasive our lack of understanding of anger and other people's behavior, and just being victims is. Um, but it's possible for us to be the only ones experiencing a loss of love. Uh, and that sounds bizarre, right? Because we think it's um, it's got to be, because really, it kind of goes to, there's sort of four people in every relationship, right? There's you, there's the other person, there's the version of you, the version of them in your head, and the version of you in their head. Um, and I've seen people do this, right? I've seen people just make up an entire story about their how they've been wronged and how they've been, and the other person is blissfully unaware of this story that this person has been weaving, sometimes for, usually if it's been going on long enough, the other person will catch wise, right?
Yeah.
Oh, this person is acting strangely around me, this person is clearly is harboring some resentment towards me, right? But for a time, it's possible to just not, for the other person to not see it, to not be aware of your story that you've created around it, about you
It,
being a victim. Yeah, go ahead, Harold.
I don't know if you've ever seen this or not, but it is a perfect example of what you're talking about. It's on Comedy Central. It's on YouTube. Key and
Mm.
Peele, the comedians Key and Peele. It's called Key and Peele Text Message Confusion. And it's about these two guys who are texting each other back and forth, and one of them is just like, oh, blah blah blah, and the other guy's like, oh, really, really, and one of them just gets so worked up and like over the top crazy, and then it's about meeting up, right? So then they meet up, and the one guy, the the one guy who's just sending the messages, he's like, hey, oh, let's go. He's happy to see his friend, and his friend is livid. He's got like an axe or a chainsaw or a gun or something, and he wants to kill his friend, right? Because on his side of the texting, there's been all this interpretation and craziness happening. So with relation to what you were saying, the one friend, I can't remember their names, but the tall one, he has no sense of love lost at all. He's like, oh, my friend, he's so funny. And then the other guy, there's loss of love, and then there's all this anger, and it's a really funny way of seeing that sort of demonstrated. So I
Well,
recommend.
I really like that you brought that up. First of all, because it's relevant, right? We, who listening hasn't been in a texting argument at some point in their life? Nowadays that's like That's very common, to misinterpret the words, or an email, right? Or
Yeah.
something like that. But it also speaks to the capacity on the other side of the relationship to what it represents to be at peace and to be well, to be in love, and while someone else is furious with us, right? The very fact that that's possible. I don't know about you, Harold. Have you ever been tried to be in an argument with someone who is at peace? It's very difficult to maintain over time, right? Well,
I
I
can't
mean,
that one
we're
every
pretty
time.
good. We're pretty good at it. We're pretty good at keeping up the fight just because we're so practiced at it. But if it's just one-sided, I mean, that's how these feuds, these resentments, they last for generations sometimes,
Yeah.
is because both sides are participating, right? And that's what makes it look real.
That's what keeps it alive. Yeah.
It keeps it alive, but we think it's the actual dynamic between the two people that keeps it alive, instead of the dynamic in our own minds that's keeping it alive. And that if just one person realized, I could see peace instead of this. That's was one of the lessons in A Course in Miracles that I love. It's not, I could sometimes see peace instead of this. I could always see peace instead of this.
On
Um,
Thursday, I can see
so,
peace.
on Thursdays, on Friday, at the start of our show, always. No. But it just speaks to how valuable this can be as we get better and better at seeing through our anger, catching wise, right, to the ruse, and calling it on its shit, basically. Hey, no, and it's not to be that crude, like, you can honor where you're at, but in some ways, like, it'd be like figuring out that the sleight of hand artists, how they're actually doing it,
Hmm.
right? Oh, hey, that distraction with the left hand's not going to keep me from looking at the right hand anymore. Sorry. I know what you're doing. It's a trick that we can catch wise to. We can see the deeper truth, and we will be at peace. We will be in love with life, with God, more and more and more. And um, there's that funny saying that's more and more people are familiar with these days, but it only takes one to tango. Right? That sounds weird, but from from the perspective of relationships and the mind, it is so amazing to be able to, in the midst of an argument, realize, I'm keeping this alive.
Yeah.
And I can put a stop to this. Now, you can't control the other person's behavior, right? We can make requests of other people, but we can't
You
control
might have to
them.
walk away or whatever.
Yeah, because that's what anger attempts to do, right? It says, I'm going to try to control you with my anger to get you to behave a certain way so that I can be okay and experience that love that you stole from me, right? But that's sort of a poor strategy. Right? So, I've never known anger to facilitate love. Right? In a
No,
roundabout way, it can begin to, with
can
this
start the conversation.
conversation. That, yeah, absolutely, Harold.
It can be the flower that catches your eye.
Yeah, it's okay. Something's going on here, and as I have a facility more for my experience of life and my responsibility for my experience of life, I could see, oh, let me look within first and see what's going on.
A cool visual that I like for what you were saying there about how when you're in that uh, sort of anger or fight with another person,
Hmm.
how you can just stop it is if you think of it like a fire, both if both people keep feeding the fire can grow and can stay alive. If one person stops feeding the fire, it creates a gap and then allows the possibility for that fire to stop burning.
Hmm.
So we can stop our part of the feeding of
Right.
that fire.
Yeah, the fuel, if you will.
Hmm.
Yeah, because we're just dumping kerosene on that thing.
Oh, sometimes, yeah, we're just jet fuel.
What's the image that comes to my mind is dumping kerosene on the fire, not knowing that we are, and being like, "Hey, stop dumping kerosene on this fire," to the other
We're
person.
we're dumping the kerosene while we're blaming them for the kerosene.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And in fairness, usually both parties are dumping kerosene, and neither party is taking responsibility.
No, they're pointing the
But
finger at the other person while their
all
one arm is on the jerry can.
but all we have is us. Like, we can't go into their mind and say, "Hey, let's look at this anger." In fairness, you can have that. You can try to have that conversation with that person. Hopefully, after things have settled down. but really, only we can generate willingness within ourselves. And um, the beauty of this is we get to be at peace more of the time. Like we don't notice oftentimes because anger, it's not the anger necessarily that feels so good, but usually the justification of the anger,
Hmm.
right? Because, but we don't notice how just high energy, frantic levels of energy anger is, right?
Oh man, it
It's
is a hungry fire.
exhausting. It's
Yeah, it
exhausting.
takes a
Yeah,
lot.
I like that analogy. It's a hungry fire.
Yeah.
Man, it sucks up the fuel, right? And we don't realize how draining it is for us to be angry all the time. We don't know how what it's doing to us. We
Hmm.
think, "Oh, I'm putting up a good defense, right? I'm not letting anybody in. No one's getting in here. This is a fortress. Lock it down." Right? Fort Knox, you know. But we don't see just how much energy is expended to keep up that defense. And there's nothing. there's it's not worth it. It's not worth it because there is a love. I call it the love of God. You might call it something else. But there is a love that is just with us. It just marches with us. It just is with us at all times. Our awareness of it, our experience of it comes and it goes. But no one can steal it from you. And so to have this fortress around it, around something that can't actually be stolen, um, and in fact, oftentimes is the perpetrator to the experience of lack of love, is our own anger. That is pretty good motivation for letting it go, in my experience at least. That, wow, you know what? Not only do I get to let go of this anger, but I get to see a deeper truth that I I can access that love, that peace in the love of God or spirit or big mind or oneness or wholeness. It's a beautiful place to visit or to return home to.
Mm.
That's how I talk about it sometimes. And man, we just can't return when that fortress is up. It's kind of funny. It's so unconscious. We don't even know what the fortress is guarding. We know it's an effective defense. We don't know what's being defended, though. Actually, there's a line from a lesson in the Course in Miracles that says, "Anger is a defense against the truth." We don't know anger is a defense against the truth.
Mm-hmm.
That's the problem. Because why would we want to defend something so beautiful? Defend against something so beautiful from being taken from us that can't be taken. And that's my experience of the quote unquote truth. What do you think, Harold?
I think this show passed very quickly for me.
It did, yeah.
This is one of my favorite topics because it is so universal and common and almost always completely avoided.
Yeah.
Because of the very first thing we talked about, which is your relationship to anger.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you're watching, or I guess listening to this show, and you tell yourself, "I'm not angry. I just get frustrated sometimes," or I just get a little bit pissed off. It's okay. You get angry. Let's have the conversation. Let's have the conversation.
And it really is. This is such a portal to transformation, this particular conversation.
Yeah.
Because it involves all aspects. It involves, our physical being, it involves our emotions, it involves our belief structures, the way we think, who we're being, and ultimately what we are. It really is such it's such a good offering or entrance or doorway into sort of the whole kit and caboodle, if you
Yeah.
will.
Yeah, and that's what anger has to offer us. Right? That's what it can become for us. Right? When you talked about our relationship to anger, anger is going to be part of life here. In fairness, it can actually become less and less part of life here. But it's going to be part of life. And so long as it's part of life, why not have it be a gateway for you to a return to love, to a return to peace, to a return to that beautiful place within? And you'll find some pretty amazing things can happen from that place. As far as manifestations in the world, right? The conversations we're able to have from that place, the relationships we're able to have. Imagine being in a relationship where you're pretty darn consistent at not blaming your partner for your anger.
It would transform everything.
That's the only word I can think of. Transformation. It's beautiful. So thanks for taking this journey with us. And any parting shots, Harold? We're coming up to the end.
I think we kind of actually we kind of parting shotted it together there.
Yeah. Fantastic.
It really is, and this is one. This is a good one to. You can do everything on your own if you want, but this is a good one. This is a good one to utilize the power of coaching for.
Absolutely. Yeah. Have this conversation with somebody who can point you in the right direction.
Yeah, because sometimes it's difficult. It's really, really hard for me anyway at the start of it all.
Yeah.
To be able to distinguish, even just going from the anger to the sadness, that I needed a lot of support with that.
And that is a great segue, Harold, I think, because you and I are both coaches. And if any of you want to dive deeper into your self-discovery of anger and what's behind it, we work with people in that way, Harold and I both. So you can find me. Just reach out to me at www.coachtylerthurman.blogspot.com. You can find my email, my office phone number there. And Harold, how about you?
You can find me at www.haroldfeddersen.ca.
Fantastic. And thank you all for joining us and bearing with us with our technical difficulties today. Sorry about that. And we look forward to being back with you next week in all of our visual glory. So until next time, we wish you all the love that's in your heart. Take care.